When most people talk about manliness in anime and manga, you get the same couple series making the rounds. Stuff like Fist of the North Star, Early JoJo, and the occasional Delinquent series. It's not like these people aren't mentioning more obscure works like Rikyo and Golgo 13, but between all the common answers, there's one series I don't think gets repped enough for what it brings to the table. Manly struggles and perseverance, along with a brotherhood of friendship and victory, that would have it be cited as a representative of Shonen Jump's golden era. One that continues to cut so deeply into the hearts of men. So grab your weapons, put on your brave face, and make sure you got your bros' backs. It's time to enroll in Otokojuku. To even tell the story of Sakigake Otokojuku, it's important to understand its author, Akira Miyashita. Miyashita initially wanted to be a guitarist, inspired by Jimi Hendrix. He would play in bars before seeking out his manga career. So when he failed his entrance exams, he became serious about going to art school. He would already become a seasoned mangaka before Otokojuku, drawing various series for Shonen Jump and other magazines. Inspired by classics like Tetsujin 28 and the ninja works of Shitaro Sanpei, he would start out as an assistant to Takahashi Yoshihiro, where he was scolded for drawing crowds as Yakuza lookalikes by their editor, when he was just trying to make each guy look a bit unique. After Miyashita's first one-shot work was published in another magazine, he would bring it to Hiroshi Motomiya, Takahashi's mentor, along with being the creator of Otoko Ippikigaki Daisho, a series that helped propel Shonen Jump into popularity. Motomiya was a huge inspiration to Miyashita ever since he was a kid, to the point where Motomiya's works were the reason Miyashita would end up making the kind of manga he did, as they fulfilled a power fantasy that he desperately craved in his meek and average childhood. Once given the one-shot, Motomiya would shout at Miyashita, calling his work boring and saying he'd never get anywhere trying small-time stuff like this, and gave him back the manga without even looking at it. This would end up reigniting Miyashita's drive and push him towards a hard-boiled, manly style. With this renewed passion, he went on to finish the manuscript for his first serialization, Ultimate Path Private High School. And you know Miyashita had something cooking from the get-go when Ultimate Path starts out like this.
This is the absolute manga about intimidating, long jacket wearing, violence starting, abnormally ridiculous, unreserved eye-catching hardasses, Ultimate Path Private High School.
Oh, and as soon as he showed it to Motomiya again, Motomiya called the vice chief editor of Shonen Jump and demanded they ran it in the magazine. The idea of fights and school stories, along with human charm and chivalry, would also come from both Hana no Wendan and Koha Genjiro, both manga from the 70s with delinquent themes. This sort of vibe would eventually evolve into a lot of his later works. When creating Otokojuku, he started over, without the feeling of wanting to make a hit series and instead drawing with the passion of creating what he wanted to. Miyashita's interest in Bushido and the military's worldview and mindset allowed him to create, in his words, a story of a man's world, where even in the strictness of a hierarchical society, one could form bonds between friends by the joys and sorrows they'd go through together. Come 1985, Sakigake Otokojuku would be serialized in Shonen Jump. To give some perspective, this was when Fist of the North Star was only 82 chapters in, and Dragon Ball was a mere 22. Otokojuku itself is a Japanese high school, dedicated for dropouts who don't quite fit into society. Edajima Heihachi is an insanely powerful genius war hero of World War II, and he rules as the principal to transform these lost causes into the ultimate men through hellish curriculum that probably isn't either legal or sane. Only through this can these outcasts learn to play a role in Japan's future through the politics, industries, and economics of the nation, to find out what it truly means to be a man. The promising Momotaro Tsurugi, or Momo as his buddies call him, is a newly enrolled student. Cool-headed and strong, he faces everything head-on while keeping a chill attitude. Naturally, his and the other freshmen's cockiness ends up having the students partake in traditional Otokojuku-style punishment. These can range from anything, from marching in a cardinal direction not letting anything stop you, to sitting in a bath of boiling oil as a candle burns to your freedom. Outlandish tests of strength, skill, and most importantly, guts. These are the kind of things that happen at the school that forges a bond between all the crazy characters, slowly adding to the main roster. With Momo as their class rep, the first years aim to survive this school from hell and become the men of tomorrow. It's not exactly a delinquent manga, but it's got a lot of delinquent themes, from the bancho aesthetic, fighting, and a sense of unity between bros within a fighting manga. And I think that's just fine. And even if these characters don't exactly look high school age, it's straight up guys being dudes. The early parts of the series are just that. The freshmen are dealing with insane teachers, ridiculous curriculum, rival schools and gangs, and even their enigmatic yet insanely powerful upperclassmen. A lot of the core cast is introduced here, like Togashi, a hot-headed yet reliable brawler, Jay, an American boxing prodigy exchange student, and Torimaru, a fun-loving, loyal fellow who just likes having a good time. The early arcs of the series are a lot of gags and funny scenarios that the students find themselves in through their time at Otokojuku, and it's a lot of fun. You get everything from kicking some sense into Hidemaru, a spoiled rich kid who invades the school, to a relaxing beach vacation that quickly turns into a training marathon for the students. Slowly but surely, the series gradually shifts into a classic staple of the shonen battle manga genre. At first, the fights pop up as circumstances of the students and the school's antics. Stuff like confronting the powerful second years or American rivals literally dropping in for a visit. Eventually, grand tournaments and challenges take place that focus more on the fighting itself than grander conflicts, while also keeping that lighthearted touch here and there. Miyashita explains that with manga like Fist of the North Star and Dragon Ball getting massively popular, he figured he could get a lot more readers if he drew fight scenes. So he did. Fist of the North Star's arrival and popularity in particular would influence Miyashita's style on a deeper level. Miyashita's older manga was filled with the older school manliness of all characters wearing school uniforms, the rough facial features, and the use of blunt weapons. When Fist of the North Star came through, it added a more refined and modern outlook, and gave Miyashita's older, flat, comical style some added dimension. You can definitely see this peak towards the middle of the series, where the use of characters with elaborate armor, weird props, and the interesting weapons they use are much more apparent, which in turn makes the world of Otokojuku itself that much more deep and detailed. Hey, Miyashita wanted the bag, so he went for it. The shift to a more contemporary depiction of the manly world had Miyashita move away from the melancholic atmosphere of his previous works. Instead of being dramatic by having deaths be more real and shocking alongside delinquents using straight-up brute force, Otokojuku takes a more refined approach. Fancy secret techniques and ancient martial arts styles which echo other manga of the time. Stakes are higher and characters feel more unique by having their own way of dealing with problems. The entire story is filled with those super unique showdowns, insane martial arts techniques, and even manages to one-up itself every fight. Like, there's that one guy who fights with a unicycle who straight up defeats his enemies by pile driving their heads into the ground. That's not even mentioning that one dude who's a literal mummy and you can't even be hurt if you try to chop his limbs off. And, oh yeah, you can't forget about the guys on stilts, too. All of these wacky fighting styles and challenges are explained with passages from Otokojuku's own textbooks. And while these techniques and gauntlets of strength may not be wholly realistic, seeing Miyashita break down these characters' fighting styles or match types is just as interesting as it is entertaining. It's kind of like Baki, where there's so much detailed explanation you find yourself half believing that these insane anecdotes about martial arts history might actually be real. And don't get me wrong, it's not always much of a pissing contest where each fighter is like, "My ancient Chinese Kenpo is better than your ancient Chinese Kenpo." As powerful as they can be, the main crew isn't always strong enough to beat some of these struggles. Characters like Togashi and Torimaru, who don't even have proper fighting styles, often end up having to think on their feet and figure out how to beat their opponents, no matter how ridiculous they may be.
Yeah, but mostly fighting, it's a mental game.
Really?
Brendan, you're a smart kid.
Yeah, I know.
You're not a tough kid. You're not a strong kid. You're not a fighter.
Right.
But you may have a mental edge over your opponent, and that's what you gotta use.
Be it on their own or working together with their classmates, having moments like these allowed this series to still generate that hype from each encounter, while also staying true to just having that pure manly fighting spirit. This balance leads to some crazy scenes that can even well up emotion in me every time I see him. Miyashita describes that he comes up with these sort of scenes of having everyone come together to strike back at the situation first, then building the story from there. In other words, it's the drawing that pulls the story together. With each match in each tournament, not only do the stakes get higher and higher, but the core roster of students grows too. But even with the amount of main characters getting added to each arc, you still get to see every single one of them have their chance to legitimately shine, be it through a backstory or even coming in clutch when you least expect it. One small thing I love about the series is how Miyashita is able to keep that moment of who's fighting next always hype when it's revealed. It keeps you guessing on how a character can feel so confident when they're all like, "Yeah, leave this guy to me." Or makes you realize how perfect a matchup can be when you haven't seen much of a member of the ensemble cast. What makes me really happy though is the students that don't even fight end up having their big moments too. Like, I'm talking actual game-changing moments that help bring Otokojuku out of some of the toughest times they're in. Take Hidemaru for instance, that spoiled rich kid I mentioned before. He goes through a whole charming character arc where he comes to the school as a cranky brat, but eventually learns to trust his brothers and support them in ways that only he can do. I'm not gonna lie and say that Otokojuku is a series about life lessons and deeper themes, but that's not to say these things don't pop up because of circumstance. When you look at everything these characters go through and how they change and bond, trusting their comrades with their life, or sparing their opponent in order to show them heart because that's just the type of men they are, it's hard not to see at least something. Whatever obstacles you might face, you should still trust and protect those close to you as best you can. And the people who appreciate that will do the same for you 10 times over. Otokojuku isn't flawless though. While there's only one okay arc in the series, there's some questionable plot decisions and pacing can be rushed here and there. That one okay arc's abrupt ending and what felt like a regression in vibes to the early manga afterwards would have it feel like its ratings got shot in the kneecaps, eventually leading to the end of the manga itself.
Oh man, shit.
Either that or Miyashita felt like he wanted to wrap up all the action after half a decade of going hard with it. You might think it'd get all repetitive, and at some points it seems like it does, but as a whole it's an awesome ride and even ends on a heartwarming note. It's nice that the series doesn't take itself too seriously, but still has that impact when it's all said and done. The anime ends partway through the manga, and it puts a bigger focus on earlier arcs. This isn't a bad thing, since it's fun to see these moments in motion. The production of the anime is also based more on the manga's earlier style, so characters don't look as clean and refined as they do in the later parts of the manga. Unfortunately, the way the anime ends is a rough landing, to say the least. The last few episodes of the show suffer from super rushed fights represented through recap stills, skipping straight to the arc's final battle. While the anime original moments in the last two episodes give a sense of finality and closure, It's a real shame that the series was cut short before the biggest and arguably most important arc. This isn't to say the anime isn't worth watching though. The anime staff actually has a lot of heavy hitters on its side, with Masami Suda on the character design bringing his experience from Fist of the North Star, and the legendary Shunsuke Kikuchi doing the music, whose tunes you've definitely heard before. They even got Daisuke Gori for Edajima Heihachi, who would eventually go on to be Mr. Satan in Dragon Ball, and Heihachi Mishima from Tekken. It's not like the series has faded into total obscurity or anything. Otokojuku has been referenced a ton of time in shows like Gintama and has been an inspiration for series like Kango Bancho. The constant appearance of Minmay publishing articles of obscure martial arts and events would be something that would stay in the readers' hearts for decades after the fact. The idea of which being present in Kango Bancho, Hunter x Hunter, and Baki like I said before. Otokojuku has a bunch of games across console generations and genres that are all really neat. Seeing the series in different styles is always fun. You got Famicom and Game Boy adventures, a dodgeball game, and 2 fighting games repping characters and arcs from the entire series, all packed with details and references. Characters from the series will still show up in Shonen Jump crossovers every so often too, so it's nice to know that they haven't been forgotten. Otokojuku also has 2 movies. One is an animated special that takes the crew to America to fight other nations in a massive country-spanning tournament. It's enjoyable to see the whole gang work as a team, even if some parts are a bit weirdly paced in its runtime of just past 70 minutes. I think it ends up being just alright, but it's got vibes from a bit of everything from the series, so it's worth a watch. The other is a live-action series directed and choreographed by Tak Sakaguchi, who even plays Momo in the film. It covers a lot of stuff until the end of the first major arc, and omits some characters and changes some plot around, but it's still interesting to see how stuff gets adapted. I wouldn't be surprised if some of the actors were actual adults in the role of students since they look older than they should, just like the manga. Seeing the characters as real people hanging out in school is a blast, and the fights are great to see come to life. There's a bunch of spin-offs and sequels to Otokojuku that even feature characters from Miyashida's other works, some even from more recent years. These can range from character origin stories, side stories based off one of the cast members, to even more wacky stuff written by other authors. While not all of these are translated, if you look at Miyashida's future work, he really just lets his freak flag fly, and these stories really do go places. I wish there was a modern adaptation of the series, since right now it's stuck in patchy slot animation hell. So this is the only tangible thing we have of the later parts of the series, aside from some obscure collectible art cards with anime art on them. But hey, with older series like Bastard, Hokuto no Ken, and Kinnikuman coming back, the recent gag anime shorts, Storm Collectibles teasing a new Otokojuku line of figures, and the 40th anniversary coming up in 2025, here's hoping we get something of a revival, even if it's just an HD release. This is where I shoehorn in the emotional part of the video, but hey, stick with me for a second please. I spent a long time working on this video, and throughout the last year and a half, there's been a lot of stuff going on in my life that really put the pressure and stress on me. I won't go into detail, but it was tough. Really tough. With this video's production being a constant throughout all that time, I kept thinking about the Otokojuku bros and everything in their story. It made sense for me to follow in their stride and keep on trucking. So I did. It made me feel like if I kept on fighting, kept on researching, writing, learning new editing tricks, not wanting to lose and give in, I'd be able to at least do some justice for a series that doesn't really get talked about that much. Like I said before, Otokojuku isn't something that will look at you directly and say, this is the lesson you should learn, but it still has those lessons between the lines. Underneath all the funny gags, past all the crazy fights, there's something there. From trusting your homies and having their back, learning from your opponents and your own mistakes, fighting for what you believe in and never giving up. It's hard to say that Miyashita didn't intend for these messages to make it through to the reader. I really do think the series deserves a chance to shine in the spotlight once again. Yeah, it's got its missteps and weird moments, but at the end of it all, it really does resonate with you when you see these guys dealing with their struggles with their guts and their capital B brotherhood. Using those forged bonds and strength to push past their limits. Because after all, sometimes all you gotta do, all you can do, is get back up and keep fighting.